Radio Retrofuture.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Radio Retrofuture. I'm Bonsert, as always, and today with me is Xerxes Pretorius Horde of the new Jacobin Club. How are you doing, Xerxes?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on here.
You're welcome, and thank you for being here, of course. For those that watch the edited stream, you probably have noticed we have a new intro, which is made by one of my patrons, Greggy Frost. He's a Dutch cinematographer who will soon also start with photography, he said. And he's also doing quite some other stuff, so I will post his Patreon down below. And, you can thank him for the new intro by just visiting his Patreon and see what he has to offer. Speaking of Patreons, you can also help this show greatly by supporting us there. A matter of fact, we have a small film project beginning of 2017 with Ragtag. For that we also need to make some purchases, so any contributions to our Patreon will be more than welcome. But enough about that. Let's go back to you, Xerxes. How are you these days?
Very good.
Any specific things that keep you occupied right now?
As of late, well, we're the band, as obviously you know, I can see the little logo up there. We just are celebrating our 20th anniversary as a band. To be very specific, what that means is it's been 20 years since we've been performing. Our first live performance was now over 20 years ago. It would have been 20 years ago in September. And we did a fairly large show in our hometown. That would be Saskatoon in Western Canada. That was recorded near the end of October. And we're in the midst of rehearsing for another 20th anniversary show in Regina, which is south of us. That's the capital of our province. So we're doing that, and then we're already in the middle of sifting through our recordings from throughout this year, because we want to put out a special 20th anniversary release in 2017 that will largely be probably a live collection of the songs from the show that was just recorded, and perhaps also some music from our UK tour earlier this summer.
All right. Well, we can talk a little bit more about your upcoming releases by the end of the episode, so people will be able to know where to find it by that time. Let's just talk about your 20 years. How did your band start?
Well, see, when it started, I was a drummer, and I was a drummer in bands in that early '90s explosion of all this independent underground rock that all of a sudden became very fashionable because of the success of bands like Soundgarden and Green Day, and I was touring in bands like that. But it really wasn't my thing. I really wanted to do something much more visually impactful, and at the time that sort of thing was not popular. Of course, back then it was all ripped jeans and t-shirts and don't wash your hair and grunge and all that sort of thing. And a friend of mine introduced me to a fellow who was a drummer like myself, and we both had this similar idea of wanting to start this band that kind of was had the sort of storytelling feeling that you get from those Nick Cave albums, especially like Murder Ballads was a big influence on us, and also another kind of aesthetic influence was the Edward Gorey's artwork and his short stories. I kind of wanted to write music and perform music that looked and sounded to me the way that Edward Gorey and Nick Cave and that sort of very dark storytelling aesthetic kind of delivered. And yeah, there was still no definite kind of dread punk or steampunk. This kind of turn of the century horror sort of vibe wasn't. It still would have been considered goth at the time, right? I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Probably.
So we started out like that. We started out very much wanting to kind of do what Nick Cave was doing. I was also a fan of the original American death rock bands like 45 Grave and Christian Death, and also like The Damned quite a bit from Great Britain. So put all those together in a blender, and that's kind of what we came out as.
Yeah, no, what were the influences of, rather known costume bands like Marilyn Manson was great in the 90s? Or?
No, I still to this day don't own any Marilyn Manson. Marilyn Manson was a little too, when Marilyn Manson first album came out, I noticed it because I was a DJ at a community radio station and I looked at it, but to me it was too kind of heavy metal sort of, I was much more into the classic kind of horror rock sort of vibe, so I didn't really gravitate towards Marilyn Manson and Rob Zombie and things like that. I not so much so, which is funny because later on, when in the mid 2000s, when New Jacobin Club became a little more of a heavy metal band, we often got compared to Rob Zombie and Marilyn Manson, even though I really think we retained much more of a kind of a folky storytelling sort of edge. The music was very heavy, but at the same time, it was a far cry from the sort of industrial sort of heavy metal that other costume bands were doing, like Marilyn Manson, like Rob Zombie. So, yeah.
But according to you cooperate with a documentary there. You did mention the Misfits. As a major inspiration.
Yes, they were. The Misfits were one of my favorite groups ever since I can remember being old enough to have money of my own and going into a record store and purchasing music. And I was always fascinated by how dark they could be, how kind of how dark and conniving the music was, and yet it was so tuneful and melodic and so satisfying, and I really liked that. I wanted to write music like that. I wanted to tell a dark story without resorting to gimmicks of industrial rhythms and the whole Marilyn Manson industrial gothic sort of pandering. Wasn't interested in that. I wanted to write songs that I could play acoustically as well if I wanted to. And we finally achieved that this year. We did part of our UK tour acoustically, and we recorded a show in Reading, actually.
Okay, nice. Well, what do you think of newer brands of newer genres of music like Psychobilly, or the almost Misfits-esque blues, no, not blues, but country music bands?
Yes.
That are very similar in themes.
Yes.
Have a very own sound.
We are no stranger to that. Here in North America, that's our parallel. We do all the time get associated with the psychobilly and the horror rock, and we've played lots of shows. We played with bands like the Necromantics and Forbidden Dimension and the Brains, and we know these bands, and we are kind of considered part of that scene, largely because a lot of people don't know where to place us. We sometimes play with heavy metal bands, we do gothic shows, we do psychobilly shows, we do all of this because we kind of fit in everywhere and nowhere at the same time. But yeah, I do like some of those groups. If you want to hear one of the best kind of horror punk, they're not as rockabilly, but horror punk bands from Canada of all time, go check out Forbidden Dimension. They are the godfathers of that scene here in Canada, and I know in the United States they are also regarded very highly as kind of they have a cult status there. They've been around for 25, 30 years, and we have had the honor of sharing the stage with them a few times in the last 5 years. So yeah, I don't listen to a lot of that rockabilly, psychobilly myself, but we're no strangers to it. We're around it all the time over here.
Okay. How does that make you feel that you, like you said, you fit in everywhere and nowhere? I have a theme group who is in a very similar situation. Does that bother you? Do you enjoy it?
We enjoy it. It doesn't bother us because, and we've talked about this as a band many times, how if the psychobilly audience likes us because some of our older music was a little more in line with that, we like that we want them to come out and enjoy it, and we still play music from all periods of the band's history. When the goth crowd comes out, we love them, and we do have our big, slow, grandiose, kind of majestic goth numbers. The steampunk crowd we adore. Most of our themes are very turn of the century Victorian, kind of tending towards kind of the more occult and kind of mad scientist sort of themes. And, and the heavy metal crowd, they still come out and see us. There's a lot of people that still consider us a heavy metal band as well. And where we are in Western Canada, it takes all of those subcultures and those subgroups to fill our concert hall. And we're very fortunate that we can play busy shows here. And it's because I think we appeal to so many different groups that we bring a bigger crowd out.
Mm-hmm. Do you also feel that it brings the groups closer together?
I think it does. And I do see how people from, let's say, the kind of the heavy metal crowd, they like some of our music because we do some of the faster once in a while we pull out some faster songs, and there's some guitar solos and some heavy guitar parts. But they actually enjoy our other more kind of classic rock or rockabilly or steampunk sounding songs. They enjoy those just as much. And I think a lot of people from different musical scenes and subcultures that come out, they find out that, hey, I actually enjoy the rest of what they do too. I just originally came here to see them, breathe fire and smash things, but turns out their music was enjoyable. That's always our goal at the end of the night.
Mm-hmm. Let's see where we can go, because you wanted to talk more about like the differences and similarities between groups. Is there something you noticed between how one group, what certain groups like about you more than what goths like more about you than steampunks do, for instance?
Yeah. I'll say something about, I can only comment on the steampunk crowd insofar as our experiences overseas, because we don't have that audience here in Western Canada.
Okay.
No, and if any Canadian is listening to this and they say, no, there's a big steampunk community here, that's fine. I know there is out in Toronto, out east. That is half a world away from us. We are out in Saskatchewan, and flying to Toronto, we don't fly to Toronto. We may as well fly to London, England. It's the same expense to us. So Toronto is another world from where we are. And yes, they have the Grand Canadian Steampunk Weekend, which maybe someday we hope to maybe play, maybe even next year. But out where we are, we don't have the steampunk community. There are some people that are enthusiasts, but they don't come out and congregate in public and create these big events like they do in the UK and Europe. So I can only comment on what's happening in the UK. And from what I found, the way the steampunk community reacts to what we do is that they're basically okay with anything, and it's wonderful. So I was worried at first, what happens when we play these more aggressive songs, that when we came over there? What if we play some of our older material? Is that going to turn everybody off? Is that going to scare everybody? Are they going to go, oh, no, that's too scary. We're not into that. And you know what? It never happened. Everywhere we played, we got nothing but, never felt like anyone made us feel, or any audience, any of the steampunk audiences, they never made us feel that we were out of place. Oh. And we had not come over there saying we're a steampunk band. We never once came out and said that. We just came over and said, we're the new Jacobin Club. Can't wait to meet all of you. We have a lot of, friends and fans out here that we've been waiting years to meet, and that's why we were there. So, no, the steampunk crowd was incredibly receptive, very friendly. We, in a way, we were, I don't want to say we were surprised. We were surprised everyone was so nice. That's not what I mean. I mean, we were pleasantly kind of proven wrong that we had nothing to worry about. We could go out there and just do what we do.
All right. One of my faithful watchers asked on Facebook, otherwise I'll forget, because I don't have Facebook open. Would you consider coming to the Netherlands during Halloween for a vampire steampunk?
Well, thing? Of course.
Okay, well,
We would consider we'll consider everything as long as it makes as long as it fits in with our lives, properly, financially, time-wise. There's nothing we will not consider. The most difficult thing for us to do, really, is to go south to the United States. That's far more difficult than anything else.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to ask, do you go to the north of the United States, or? Alright.
No. Sorry.
Okay. But you mentioned how the steampunk community reacted to you. How's that different from, let's say, the goth or the metal community?
Well, I think it depends where you are. Where we are in Western Canada, I'm saying it, and if there's anyone from Western Canada that's listening or ever hears this, this is the truth. We're very lucky in Western Canada, and I think the music scene has grown since the birth of the true 21st century independent music scene. It's grown so that everyone really does kind of support each other, and I think we've come to the conclusion that it doesn't matter if it's specifically goth or specifically metal or whatnot. We go out and a lot of people go to the shows and enjoy what's there. And again, we come from a relatively far off, more secluded part of the country. And if there is a goth band in your city, that's it. That's the goth scene. That's it right there. In our city, there are a few more heavy metal bands. There are probably half a dozen. There's not really another band like us. If we go 6 hours west, which is the closest bigger city, 6-hour drive, you do get a few more kind of gothier bands. There may be some slightly more steampunk groups there out in Calgary and Edmonton. But really, it's there's not enough members of any kind of sub-scene or genre to really have a show that's all one genre and then fill it with enough people and make enough money to keep the scene kind of vibrant and economically viable. So yeah.
Yeah, but you in what scene did you start? In the gothic or the metal?
Punk. I was a punk in the early 90s. Yeah, and the metal. There was no metal in my city, in our community. That for a long time. I think that came more in the last 15 years. There was. I know at the tail end of the 80s and early 90s there were some bands from that original mid 80s kind of golden age of goth, that explosion there, the tail end of Sisters of Mercy and Fields of Nephilim kind of winding down. But there hasn't been anything resembling goth in our province, except perhaps us for 20 years, I would say. Mm-hmm. So we stand out not as a steampunk band, but as just a theatrical oddity all into itself. Whether you call it goth or steampunk or art rock or anything, any of those things, they all apply and they're all equally correct, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. And what was your first steampunk gig? What was that like? Was that like had you heard of steampunk by the time?
Oh yes. I'm a huge fan. I've been, we were talking before we went live. I was following the evolution of this steampunk community in the music scene because it's very interesting. Because steampunk's not really a style of music as much as it is an aesthetic. I was following it in the music scene from, we were saying the late 2000s it started to really manifest itself, right? Mm-hmm. And I've been collecting and buying and listening to a lot of groups, and a lot of these groups came from that goth background, did they not, right?
All right.
And into the steampunk community, and I think it really was just kind of, it's not that bands were changing what they were doing, they were able to define it, Mm-hmm. So if your themes were Victorian, your themes are turn of the century, and a lot of the themes in our band very much revolve around kind of the occult and tampering with natural law and science and the Hellfire clubs, and coupled with the way we dress, everyone said, hey, well, there's a steampunk band from Canada. And the first time I heard that, I thought, really? That's fantastic. I love that. I have no problem with that. And when we came over, the first completely steampunk event that we played was A Splendid Day Out in Morecambe. And it floored us with, you know, how the community as one entity all had the same kind of artistic aesthetic and goal, and yet how different everyone was, and how accepting they were of what we were doing, despite the fact that I didn't think we fit any sort of mold of a traditional kind of steampunk musical act to them. And yet we had a great time. Everyone loved it, and I think we could have probably stayed up till the sun rose the night after we played, talking to everyone. Hotel staff eventually told us all we had to go to bed.
Yeah. Did you ever play at Hellfire Club, the Black Box?
No. Where is that?
I don't know. A listener on Facebook mentioned it. Yeah, but before he also had some other questions I'd like to ask you. But before that, when you for the first time met the steampunk community, how was it different in, let's say, attitude or something else that made it different from, let's say, metal or gothic?
I like that question because me and my band, we've discussed this. Now, this isn't necessarily true for the difference between steampunk and every genre, but here's a difference, and I'll explain it this way. In some scenes, metal's a good example, and at least this happens out here in Canada, and I think North America. When someone hears a band is playing in town, there's a new metal band, and everyone says, let's go see them. I hear they're real good. The attitude is this: I'm gonna go to this concert, and I better be impressed. I hear they're good. Don't let me down because I'm here to judge whether or not you're as good as everyone says. That's kind of a more metal attitude. With the steampunk crowd, this is what we felt like it was. So a new band's coming to town, and everyone says, you have to go see this band. They're excellent. You're going to love them. And instead, the attitude is, I'm going to see this band. I can't wait. I heard everyone said they're great. And everyone's excited to see this band. Mm-hmm. So there's kind of an aspect of this kind of, it's weird because it's, in a way, it's support, like everyone's excited about this event, this concert, or this festival, or this band that I've never heard. I've never heard them, but I think they're going to be great. And and people told us that. I heard all about you guys. I've never heard you before, but I couldn't wait to come see it. That's not the sort of thing you hear in North America as much, and it's definitely not the sort of thing you always hear in the metal scene. So There's a big difference right there.
Mm-hmm. Could it be that steampunks are more interested in the social aspect of it rather than the music? Because that's the impression when I get when I look at discussions among goths. They're more focused on the musical aspect of it when they're talking about events than steampunks are.
And that's true because steampunk is still more of a. I was saying it's an artistic aesthetic and a visual aesthetic, but it's actually, I think, becoming a lifestyle aesthetic. While we were overseas, we saw families going to the festivals, families dressed up together, and that's no longer just a visual aesthetic or a hobby. That's a little bit of a lifestyle, right? When your whole family's involved in that, like my family goes camping, my family goes to the steampunk festivals. Like, that's fantastic. And does that happen with metal? I think so. There are some families that do that. Yeah. There are now, but not the same way, not to the same extent. And yes, I think the social aspect is part of the scene, and I hope it always stays that way. And I hope that the steampunk community everywhere, overseas and in the United States, I hope you all realize that that's what's making your scene vibrant and strong, and that's what's making the festivals successful, and that's what's driving that economy, that tourist money that's going into these festivals, and they're able to afford to put to bring in artists and artists like us from all the way across the ocean. I hope you guys never lose that social aspect of your scene, because it would be a tragedy.
Mm-hmm. Any other observations you'd like to discuss before we move away from this topic?
No.
Okay.
Unless anything you want to ask. If anyone else has any questions, if I force myself to think of something, it's going to be funny.
Yeah, well, there were some questions, but they were not related to the community. So, first question I saw was: could you name a song that you believe is very representative of what your band has made? Or let me rephrase that question. What do you think is the best song to introduce somebody to the new Jacobin Club?
I would say, hands down, without hesitation, go listen to the song Champagne Ivy. It's off our last album, and if you know a little bit about classic film history, maybe a bit about Victorian fantastic literature, you may know what it's about, and we're very proud of that song. We currently open our shows with it. And if you're unfamiliar with Champagne Ivy, of course, is in the 1931 film version. Champagne Ivy is the prostitute that Mr. Hyde is obsessed with, and Dr. Jekyll is attempting to protect. And in that song, I think the reason it's a good song, New Jacobin Club song, is because it has both our it shows our love of sweet, harmonies and memorable choruses. At the same time, it also has a very aggressive edge. And why not? Because there's a duality in the song itself. As you hear from verse to verse, you hear Dr. Jekyll turn into Mr. Hyde. You hear one verse begin, I am man as he would be, and the next verse, I am man as he could be. And the duality of our band in terms of being a little bit steampunk and a little bit metal and a little bit goth and a little bit rock is in there, as well as kind of our favorite references to fantastic Victoriana.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one thing I noticed when I listened to some of your songs. It really has that old punk vibe I recognize from my time with the Misfits and
yes,
that kind of bands, but also that really gothic rock of the 2000s, around that period when I listened to it. So I thought that was really funny. It's like, yeah, you can indeed, like, I see why punks would like it, I see why goths can like it, and because of the themes, I can see why steampunks can like it. Speaking of which, are there any particular bands within the steampunk scene, because you already mentioned some other bands from your past, that were like, yeah, that's something I want to do, or at least inspired you to do stuff?
How much time do you have?
Well,
for me, my favorite steampunk band that I've heard, that I've been following since I think they first started releasing music, that I felt was very close to what we were doing, is Ghostfire.
Oh yeah. I don't know how to contact them because I really want them on the show.
Yeah, and I know they went through some very big member changes. And their most recent album, I know, was a little more folky, and they have a female lead singer now. But their full length album before that, I think it's called the Tiber Jig, is so similar to the vibe and the subject matter and just the sound palette that we go for. We're a little bit more aggressive than they are, but I think they're very similar. And I was a fan of them before we recorded our last album, because I think I first heard them in 2010, and I think bands like Ghostfire ended up being an influence on what we did over the last 3 years. Yeah, they're a good example. They're my favorite example. I think.
The Steampunk Waltz is actually one of my favorite steampunk songs. I love that song.
In fact, because of that song, we made the connection. Waltz. It's a traditional dance, and when we have a couple songs. We actually have. I think every album has one song that has that kind of 3/4 kind of waltz feel to it. And now on stage we introduce it. We're like, here's our waltz, right? So got that idea from just just from a Ghost Fire calling their triplet-based song a waltz, and you can waltz to it if it's slow enough. It's in 3. It's a waltz, yeah.
Yeah, and what about the men that will not be blamed for nothing?
They're one of those bands that I kept on getting recommendations for, and I'd listened. I'd heard them here and there, but I'll be honest, I never nothing. They didn't grab me until recently. And this is just this past year. On their last album, there's a song. I believe it's called "This House Is Not Haunted." Is that the name of the song?
I'm not sure.
That impressed me so much. I like the vibe of it. I like the melodies. It's almost like a motet. Like they have all the different lines, lyrical lines and melodies going simultaneously in it. And it's funny because when I found out who it was, I said, "Oh, that's the Men That Will Not Be Blamed for Nothing." I didn't know they sounded like that. I must have been just hearing weird stuff, like I heard their Victorian grindcore and stuff like that, and I didn't quite get them, so I didn't really I didn't really track down a lot of their music. But I'm just starting to listen to them.
Yeah, and I get from various sources that yes, "This House Is Not Haunted" is the title of the song.
Yes, fantastic song. Yeah.
Yeah. There was also another question: what song of the new Jacobin Club you consider to be representative of you personally?
That's a strange question. Me personally, there are a lot of songs that I write by myself, and there are songs that we write as a group. I think that there's a song on our new album called "Parade of Innocence," and I wrote it myself, and I wrote it originally not even intending it to necessarily be a new Jacobin Club song. And it fits in with our concept album of the Hellfire Club bringing about the end of the world, except that this song is about someone who leaves the group. And I think I wrote that song over a span of time where I felt like I was possibly alone or kind of abandoned. And I don't mean like by my band or my friends as much as just a lot of things in my life had been changing, and a lot of people were basically walking out the door on me, and everything from a job I'd had for 13 years to people that I thought would always be around that no longer were. And I think that song maybe has a more personal angle to it than anything else I've written, and also I think we've put the most time and effort into crafting the music and the melodies, and in the end I think the biggest personal thing for me was that I got my co-vocalist Candy to sing the chorus, and originally I was singing the whole song. I got her to sing the chorus, and I love it. I love that song because of that. So Parade of Innocence would be and it has all of our kind of retro futuristic sounds in it, our theremin and our electric cello and all that. It's a great song.
So you stayed with the group for over 20 years.
Yes.
Was there a moment in that period there was like, what are we even doing? Should we continue? And what kept you going in the end?
There were two moments. The first one was basically the year or two after we started, because nobody in our part of the country wanted to even see us. Nobody wanted us to play. We had friends in the music community that were booking us shows and stuff, but it was always the same. There were some people that liked us and thought what we were doing was interesting, but the greater part of the music community, the other bands, promoters, clubs, they hated what we were doing. They didn't want to see us do it. They didn't want us to come out and make a big, scene of ourselves or whatever. So that definitely happened in 1997 or 98. We basically broke up, and I landed a record deal with an American company that loved what we did on the basis of the owner was a huge Misfits fan and a huge Misfits collector of Misfits paraphernalia. Wow. And he signed us for an EP, and because of that, we kept going. We knew we don't have to just appeal to people in our little hometown. So But the second time I think the band almost dissolved was at the end of our... we put an album out in 2006 called Wicked City. And we toured Western Canada a couple times, which is a big thing to do. It's a big chunk of land to travel around. And at the end of 2007, it seemed like everyone was tired, and a couple of the members even said, just like you said, what are we still doing this for? Why are, how can this go? How can we achieve more than we've achieved doing what we're doing now? Nothing's changing, We're having a good time. We're having lots of fun. We're, getting respect, but financially and everything, it was so hard to keep going then. And then, of course, the band changed dramatically about a year later.
And what? How is it now? Have you had any recent member changes?
I'm happy to say, not for about 3 years. Our bassist is the newest member. He joined in 2013, and the core of the group, which is myself and the Rat King, the drummer, our cellist, and Candy playing the theremin. We have been together, the four of us, around 7 or 8 years. So if you look at the lifespan of a band, even though they're so fond of saying, I'm not an original member, but I have to turn around and say, yeah, but you've been in the band for almost 8 years. Stop saying that, because it's like, make it sound like you joined last year. So I always have to slap them on the wrist and say, stop saying that. But yeah, the core of our band has been together for between, going on 8 years or 9 years. I don't know, 2008, I guess. So yeah, that's a long time for some bands. That's two lifespans for some bands.
Yeah, I am not really someone who follows the music scene, but 20 years, that you don't hear that often. Maybe for solo artists, but not for bands. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what new heights do you aspire to now after 20 years?
Well, we realized that with the new kind of economic environment of music being something that you don't need to necessarily purchase, you can stream it. Mm-hmm. It's much more difficult to make ends meet as an artist. I work completely in the music industry, and I do play in other groups that pay bills and put food on my table more so than this band does. Mm-hmm. But they're not mine. I do other things because I'm usually more often than not I'm hired to. But with what I'd like to see this band go is the possibility of tapping into this larger community, this world community, to help us continue. And we have been doing just that. I'd like to just see more people become interested in the new Jacobin Club without us having to actually go travel all the way over there and meet you, because it's so hard. But I think our next we work with one goal at a time. Our goal for the last year and a half was to make it overseas, and we did. Our goal before that was to complete a fairly major album. There was a lot of merchandise involved. Our next goal will be to start recording our next album, which I think we're going to try and record in Los Angeles. So that's going to be a big thing for us. As far as leaving the country again, that's definitely something we're talking about. But there are a lot of other things we could be spending our finances on that will further our career instead of just cost money.
Exactly right.
We have to sit back and say, is another tour overseas worth spending all the money that our record company made this year, or is that money better put to use recording our next album, or investing in we're looking at a live album coming out in 2017. So which is more logical for us? And it's interesting, I never thought 20 years ago that I'd be making business decisions and money decisions with this group, much less running a record label for the sake of just this band that I do out of my house. So, yeah.
Is there a way for people to help you, realize your overseas ambitions?
We're very there's some aspects of our group that are very, very modern. The way we run our fan club online and our fan community, and we have a blog site for fans, and we interact with them there. We answer every single piece of email that anyone ever sends us. However, we still do not dabble in crowdfunding things, because we still feel like we want to make our money the traditional way. And rather than calling something a crowdfunder, what we'll do is we will offer our fans some, serious, very special new product or album or release or something very exclusive. And a lot of them purchase it, and we make our money that way. And if you want to support the new Jacobin Club and you want to see us make it back overseas, visit our website, get involved with our online community. All you have to do is go to our website, newjacobinclub.com, and if you've never done this before, if you've done this, don't have to do it again, but you enter your name and email, we will send you some free music, and we will send you access and links to our private blog site. Some of the blogs are public, some are just for members of our community, and sometimes, as some of you know, I'm very, very opinionated when I'm on the blog site, far more so than on Facebook or face-to-face at an interview. And so some people find that a lot of fun to read. But really, yes, it's if you want to support a band, purchase their product. We sell a box set with everything we've ever recorded since the 90s for, I don't know what it is, $30 or $35. And that's a great way to start. We are going to be offering something very special next year, which has something exactly to do with what you're talking about. We're going to be, instead of making it a crowdfunder, we're going to be offering some things where we can interact with fans and perhaps people who are goth or steampunk fans that are not in bands but really wish maybe they could be involved in something like that. This is the first time I've publicly said this, by the way. We're going to offer a couple things. One, perhaps you can help write a song with us. So what we'll do is it'll be a package that you can purchase through our web store. You send us your lyrics. I want your words. I want your ideas. And me and Candy will sit down. We'll write a song using your lyrics. I will demo it in my basement. I will send you back your own song, new Jacobin Club song with your lyrics, or if you have some guitar ideas, send me those, and we will construct a song around it. And we'll also offer, as Candy's our resident artist, she will draw or paint a special graphic for you for your song, or maybe you just want to purchase an original piece of artwork with your suggested idea. So, and these are the sort of things that crowdfunders sometimes offer as rewards. We're not going to call it a crowdfunder. We're just going to start doing this through our fan site, though. So it could be very interesting. We might end up with an album a year or two down the road of all songs that our fans helped write. Who knows? But that's kind of our idea right now. And if anything's going to help us tour internationally more, it might be projects like that.
All right. Any other things that are going on right now that people can look forward to?
In December, we're going to be kind of gifting everyone, all of our friends and fans online. We will be releasing the new Jacobin Club documentary called Blood on the Stage. It's been something that's been in the works for over a year now, and it is in the final stages of the editing, and you will see it before Christmas, along with another music video filmed in the UK. And this isn't a new release that you need to order or buy from us. This is something that's going to be right online that you're going to be able to watch the day it comes out. We'll let you all know. We don't have an exact release date yet. It will be between now and Christmas. So the new Jacobin Club, Blood on the Stage, it's a documentary that focuses on what it's like to be a theatrical performer, a performance art, what it's like to be wearing costumes on stage and have swords and hammers and torches and everything on stage with us. It's about that sort of life as a performer like that.
All right. Any other... someone mentions that you should be proud of what you accomplished.
Thank you.
Any other announcements before we go to the final question?
No, I think that covers it.
All right. Then for some words of inspiration, what is the secret to keeping a band together for 20 years?
The secret is, number one, and this doesn't sound like a very big secret, but just because someone quits, don't change your name. You lose your legacy. Everything you put into that, everything that everyone identified as your band, is not there anymore. Not everyone is your friend. When you change your band's name just because one person left, it's like throwing away all the work you did. And you can't say, hey, but it's still me, it's still the same members, it's just a new project. Fine. Then it's a new project. If you wanna be that band, go ahead.
All right. Any other rules?
No matter what don't be afraid of, again, it's all about the name, right? I know this sounds silly. Just because one day you record an album that sounds really different than the one you did before it, if it's still you and your bandmates and it's still your music, don't change the name of your band. It's still you. You still have a legacy of your work behind you. I think that's a big part of it. How many world-famous musicians have gone through such dramatically different periods in their artistic careers, and have not changed the name of their band or themselves or or focus or whatever? I think that's a real problem. It's a 21st century problem of, we're not really metal anymore. We're more psych rock or whatever, like going through that sort of garbage. Or that was when we were goth. Now we're your steampunk. And so we changed our name, or, why?
Someone mentioned Bowie, by the way.
Perfect example. Thank you. Except I don't think David Bowie would change his name, but that he was actually... we probably had something going on there, because David Bowie was actually one of the people that was in my head when I was saying that.
Yeah, I was actually thinking of Madonna.
Madonna? Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, anyway, with that, let's...
Vanilla Ice? There you go. There's a good one.
Oh, wow.
I only went through the new metal period, right? And he's on tour again with Back to the 90s. Are you going to go see it in Saskatoon? I know you are. February 17th. Yeah. Vanilla Ice and TLC and the guy that sings "Everybody Dance Now" or whatever. No, not that guy. Tone Loc, is he on there?
I feel horribly old now.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right. Well, with that horrible realization, I suggest we end the show. So, people, thank you for watching. I will post the links to the new Jacobin's website down below. You can subscribe to their newsletter to receive all their additional things, and you can
free
join
music.
Yes, free music, and you can join their fan club online. Also, links will down below in the description. Of course, you can support this show by visiting our Patreon, sharing it, liking it. Of course, Patreon would also be greatly appreciated at this point for upcoming recordings. Yes, and with that, I will bid you adieu. And as always, thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Dark and red, and I prefer green, fresh, sun, earth texture.
For Steampunk, for example, Future is one of the greatest inspirations. It's funny how something that hasn't happened yet can inspire such huge and massive creativity.
Don't have too much respect for the old literature and play with literature. That's what I would like everyone to do.
Get your stuff done. Get your stuff done. They're waiting on you.
Do it all once more. Watch me. I'm going to show you the next two parts right here.